All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for Job Search Help, Emotional Intelligence for Job Seekers. Don't rely solely on your book smarts. Discover how emotional intelligence can give you an edge in your job search and career growth. Delve into the essence of emotional intelligence, its relevance in the job search, and practical steps for you to enhance your own emotional intelligence or your EQ. And this is all led by Edythe Richards, an executive coach and emotional intelligence practitioner and trainer. She is an HR manager at the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, and she's a founder of A Top Career. She is also the host of 3 popular podcasts, Myers-Briggs Question Corner, MBTI for Midlife Career Changers, of which I'm sure we have many on the call, as well as EQ at Work. And I again want to thank the Friends of the Library for sponsoring. So, with all that said, can all 55 of us who are watching live and the many more that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Edythe for joining us this afternoon. And Edythe, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Robert. First, let me say that this is the first time I'm conducting a webinar with my face here at the bottom of the screen and at the top of the screen. It's a little distracting for me, so bear with me. I'm sure it's just something I've done with my computer settings here. I am also, I think, the only one tuning in here today that is not in the greater Boston area. So I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, but I'm really pleased to be joining you all here today. So I am a certified emotional intelligence practitioner and trainer, and I've been working with job seekers for over 20 years. One of my missions in life is to help people to locate and sustain meaningful employment. And the most important way I think that people can do this is through the conscious use of emotional intelligence, or EQ, as I call it. So let's go ahead and get started. And before we go any further, I want to define what emotional intelligence is. There are a lot of definitions out there. This is the one that I like because it cuts straight to the concept, recognizing, understanding, and managing your own emotions, and recognizing, understanding, and influencing the emotions of others. So in practical terms, this means being aware that emotions drive our behavior and impact people, both positively and negatively, and learning how to manage those emotions, both our own and in others. And I always say the best gauge of a person's EQ is how they show up under stress. Emotional intelligence becomes extremely important when we're trying to meet tight deadlines, for example, or when we're receiving critical feedback, or when we are dealing with challenging relationships. It also shows up profoundly when we're in the midst of a job search. And I know that's why many of us are here today. So this brings me to my first question for the group. Why is emotional intelligence important in the job search? And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And if you could, if you're comfortable doing so, just chiming in the chat.
And Edythe, it might take, 15, 30 seconds before people write a complete sentence or two.
Understand. Okay. Thank you, Robert. Yeah, this just gives us a good opportunity to really think about why we're here today, and why this is important in the job search at this time in your life. So I'm seeing here demonstrating a good match, demonstrating confidence, so you can maintain or keep a job once you get one. That's really important as well, because sometimes we think about when we're in the job search, oh, I have to get a job, and then it is about getting through that probationary period and being able to keep the job. So these are skills that we, they're constant. They're constant. We have to keep up with them. Potential employers need to know that you're stable and able to work as a team without distractions, absolutely. If you are stressed, not handling it well, you can have trouble during interviews, helping you to decide what people and environments you want to work with, approaching interviews with flexibility, absolutely. Seeming seeming calm or desperate for a job, being able to manage that with your own confidence. So all really good answers here. So thank you all for chiming in. These are all really important to be mindful of during our job search here. All right. So I am going to move on here. I want to mention two things before we go further that really speak to the importance of EQ. First is emotions are universal. We all have emotions, and how we choose to deal with them varies from person to person, from family to family, culture to culture, situation to situation. So let's talk for a moment about a common emotion that many of us may be dealing with right now, which is anxiety. So some people are more comfortable talking about their anxious feelings. Others may exhibit their anxious feelings in unhealthy ways. Some people may use physical activity or sports to ease their minds. Some people might get hyper focused on getting that job, while others may be more casual about it. So this is my first point here, is that everyone has emotions and you can't escape them. You have to find a way to deal with them. And secondly, emotions impact performance. So anxiety is one of those emotions that can completely derail you if you let it. There's a lot of uncertainty if you're unemployed. You don't know when or if you'll be able to find the job. And once you do, are you going to have a salary that's able to pay your bills? Are you going to have a good work environment, a good boss? If you're actively job searching, does your anxiety come across in your communications with recruiters through email or even in an interview? I know a couple people mentioned this in their comments. The problem is that a lot of us, and I'm going to venture to say that it's the majority of us, don't stop to think about the behavioral aspect of that feeling that we're portraying to others. And this can affect not just our performance, but also our relationships. So I'd like to invite you all to pause for a moment here and reflect on this and be honest with yourself. Think about whatever challenge it is that you're facing right now, and then think about the behavioral aspect of that challenge. How is that affecting the people around you? And you don't necessarily need to share unless you'd like to. This is something I just like to invite you to think about on your own. And if anyone would like to chime in here, I can address what you're saying, and I think Robert can also help me to monitor the chat features here. Okay, and I do have 2 points, general points I'd like to focus on today. First is that I'd like to introduce you to the EQI 2.0 model of emotional intelligence. And this is a very robust quantitative measure of emotional intelligence. And then I want to spend the majority of our time together today focusing on what you can do starting today to grow or boost your emotional intelligence, particularly in terms of the job search. So this is the EQI 2.0 model, and it's the world's leading model of emotional intelligence. It has decades of research behind it. This allows you to quantify your emotions and compare yourselves to a norm group. So if you take the assessment, it will show how you show up. What does your behavior say about you? on the 15 elements or competencies of emotional intelligence. When we tune into these competencies, we can make better decisions, we can communicate with greater clarity, and we can increase our ability to deal with stress. We can have more connected relationships. And these are all aspects of what successful people do every day. These are skills that are critical no matter what industry you're in or what type of career that you are pursuing. And yes, I'm looking at the chat here, tips for how to get in the right confident mindset, regardless of what's going on, how to speak to hiring managers, recruiters, and we are absolutely going to get to that. So thank you for that point here. So taking an EQ assessment is going to give you a total EI score using the same scale as an IQ test. And it's also going to provide 5 composite scores measuring the 5 aspects of social and emotional functioning. So that is self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal, decision-making, and stress management. And the 15 subscales that I mentioned earlier, all critical for workplace success. Finally, it will also provide an overall well-being indicator that measures your level of happiness. And if you are here today, I'm going to provide you an offer to take this assessment at a discounted rate if you are interested in doing so. So please make sure that you are staying tuned until the end, and I can tell you how to go about that. Okay. Now, if everyone used these skills all the time, we definitely would not have a lot of the problems that we have in the world today. Unfortunately or fortunately, we are human, and these skills aren't always easy to practice, especially in the heat of the moment. So I would like to share 3 reasons why it may be difficult to practice EQ regularly. First is automatic triggers from our brain. Second is our general lack of awareness. And third is that as a society, we are in what's called an empathy decline. And I want to take a closer look at these, the 3 of these. So first, looking at automatic triggers, our emotional brain thinks much more quickly than our conscious brain. Essentially, when we encounter danger, whether it's real or perceived, our amygdala is activated. And in a split second, we rush to defend ourselves. This is our fight or flight or flee response. So in addition to being activated during a physical threat, it's activated when there's an emotional threat. So let's take a couple examples here. So think about your boss coming at you, saying that you did something wrong. Without thinking, perhaps you just try to defend yourself. And in trying to defend yourself, you may lash out. You may say something that you don't mean. You may say something that you later regret. You might get defensive. Another common response is to shut down. And you don't respond. You just withdraw inside yourself. But again, this is your body and mind's way of protecting yourself. And then, of course, there's the flee response. So you're doing whatever you can to escape the situation. But all of these responses are caused first by a physical reaction in our bodies that we cannot control, and then by our emotional reactions. So just want to say here, emotions are important. They motivate us, they inspire us. But when we are stressed, our brains can lead us to make poor decisions, say things we don't mean, lash out at others. And again, this is all in an unconscious effort to protect ourselves. There is nothing that we can do to stop these automatic triggers. This is part of being human. One thing that we can do is to try to slow down so that we can catch our emotional responses in the moment before that they lead us down the wrong path. So pausing and just counting to 3 or 5 or 10, taking a couple deep breaths. I definitely encourage folks to practice doing this. So this brings me to the second reason that emotional intelligence might be difficult, and that's self-awareness. As a society, we tend to be clueless. We have little or no idea how we are perceived. We spend very little time thinking about our strengths and our limitations, and we don't always see our biases. And worse, some of us don't care how we're perceived or act like we don't care how we're perceived. And this is actually related to the first point about emotional triggers. It doesn't feel very good to think about our weak points. So we spend a lot of time protecting ourselves against them. The fact is, this can really get us into trouble when we're job searching, because this is a time when we want to put our best foot forward and make a good impression. I have worked with many job seekers over the years who are oblivious about the impression that they're making, and a lot of them don't want to believe negative feedback they get. So what happens a lot of the time is they get into this cycle of bad behavior, specifically anger and defensiveness, and it's really a very sad thing for me to witness, and I don't want to see anybody go through that. So I do want to encourage people to try as best you can to be open to feedback, both good and bad, and actively try to work on your weaker areas. And we're going to be talking more about strategies shortly. So the third reason that EQ might be difficult in practice is that we're in an empathy decline. Our ability to connect with others in a deep and meaningful way is dropping fast. Empathy is based on emotion. It's your ability to understand your own emotions and be able to spot emotions in others. But this is where a lot of people get empathy wrong. It's about your willingness and tendency to connect with the other person at their level without using your own filter or judgment. And let me say that again. Connect with them at their level, not yours. That's empathy in a nutshell. And we are losing it as a culture and as a people. Just want to point out a couple of recent studies here. One in Scientific American that noted there has been a decline of empathy going on for decades. And another study at the University of Michigan that found over 50% decline in empathy in college students over an 8-year study period. Some may argue that technology has made it worse. We are very polarized on our ideas and our ideals. And I think recent world events really speak to this fact. We are very quick to point fingers, and all of this really does not support empathy in practice. So emotional intelligence is proven to be a key indicator of human performance and development. People with active EQ communicate effectively, they form strong relationships, and create powerful coping strategies. And these are all areas that today's job seekers need in order to be successful. We have to be able to communicate our strengths and our accomplishments in a way our interviewer can hear. When we have strong relationships, when people like us, they'll hire or recommend us for jobs. And when we're able to bounce back from failure, manage our stress and our impulses, we can cope better when things don't go our way. I want to briefly talk about some of the job search trends that we are seeing today and how that can connect to emotional intelligence. First, remote work is here to stay. So the advantage here is that there are more opportunities nationwide and even perhaps globally for many people. Physical location isn't the limitation that it once was for many career paths. The potential downside is some people are really going to miss going into the office and interacting with people in person. But this is an opportunity for you to think about how you work best. What type of environment would be best for you? The next point I'll mention is the increase in competition. So I mentioned before, I'm in the Washington, D.C. Metro area. We live in one of the nation's most competitive job markets here. And I think the market up in Boston is pretty competitive as well. This isn't necessarily news to us, but it's still disconcerting. One of the best ways you can be strategic and visible is to update your LinkedIn profile and use LinkedIn actively to engage with people. I'd argue in this job market, just updating your social media profiles isn't enough. They really do need to shine. So I do suggest investing time to make your LinkedIn profile as perfect as it can possibly be. And then this is the kicker here. Don't just expect that that's going to get employers to come your way. Where you can really make an impact here is if you use LinkedIn to engage with people. It's amazing to me the number of people who have great LinkedIn profiles, but they don't engage with their audience. And that's really a missed opportunity these days. The other question you want to ask yourself, and here, this is the employer talking here. Why should I hire you instead of all of these other people? What is it that makes you the best candidate for this position? Spend some time thinking about that. What sets you apart? There are hundreds of others who are competing for the same job that you're competing with. So you're going to need to stay sharp on this one. So third, we don't see AI displacing workers in 2024, but it will impact hiring in multiple ways. And I'm sure many of you have already seen this. AI tools are ones leveraging them for roles such as marketing. Those are likely gonna surge and reshape the way that people work. According to a recent LinkedIn study, nearly 3/4 of leaders say they would rather hire a less experienced candidate with AI skills than a more experienced applicant without them. So just making note of that. And lastly, I want to mention another trend, and I am absolutely seeing this in my workplace as well. And I happen to work for a very conservative organization. So if I'm seeing these changes where I work, I'm sure they're happening in many other places. And that is companies are favoring skills over degrees. So there really isn't much that any of us can do about these trends. We can choose to either bitch and moan about how unfair these things are, or we can see these trends as another opportunity to demonstrate some of the key EQ skills. And the one that I'm thinking about right now is flexibility, and that's adjusting your emotions and behavior to new and emerging situations and trends. And another EQ skill called self-actualization, which relates to learning and development, setting goals, and doing the work to achieve those goals. All right, and I just want to pause here because I think there were a couple of chat messages. Yep.
Basically, Edythe, we have a couple folks asking, can you clarify more about what you mean about engaging and interacting on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. So chime into conversations. So I would say start conversations yourself on LinkedIn. but also chime into other conversations that you see happening within your network on LinkedIn. And don't just say, chime in with something like, oh, that's a great point, but make sure that you're adding your perspective to the conversation. Hiring managers and recruiters are looking at a lot of these conversations, and your profile automatically gets boosted when you are engaging on LinkedIn this way. Does that help?
I think so. And Lisa also notes that she wants to keep her job search confidential, but should she still be interacting on LinkedIn, is what she asks.
Yeah, I would say yes. I was in a conversation on LinkedIn recently about this, about whether you should have the open to work banner on your LinkedIn profile. And the general consensus is that even if you do want to keep it confidential, I think you should put that banner on there, because that's kind of giving you a leg up for recruiters and hiring managers. But of course, that's a very personal decision. I don't think that interacting with conversations is really going to matter that much, in my opinion.
And then just a comment from an anonymous attendee who notes that some of your points are from more of a neurotypical perspective instead of a neurodiverse perspective, and that you need to consider intersectionality. And so that's there you go there. And I think that's it so far for comments and questions, Edythe.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, thank you all very much for your comments and your questions. And I will do my best to keep everything as diverse and free of bias as possible. All right. So I want to point out here that we are not talking about a one-size-fits-all approach to emotional intelligence. To the last point here, you are all unique. Every job seeker is unique, and as such, we all have a different challenge than anyone else in the room here today. So the particular elements of emotional intelligence that you may or may not be working on or be related, this may not be related to what I'm going to share with you today. So I do want to note that caveat here. We don't have time to go over all 16 elements of emotional intelligence. So the 4 that I'm citing here today are the 4 that one, are all related to receiving information and responding to that information. And 2, these 4 are the least practiced elements in our world today. And those are self-awareness, empathy, flexibility, and reality testing. So I want to take a closer look at each of these, and then I'm going to discuss some strategies for boosting or enhancing each of these elements. All right. So first, self-awareness, and we mentioned that a little bit already. This is your ability and tendency to recognize and understand your emotions. This means understanding the cause of your emotions and the impact they have both on yourself and your own actions, as well as the effect on other people. I want to give a shout out to a book called Insight, and it's by Dr. Tasha Eurich. That's Eurich. Dr. Tasha Eurich. The book is called Insight, Why We're Not as Self-Aware as We Think We Are. So she has studied self-awareness extensively, and she has concluded in her research that the majority of people think they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% of us really are. This is because we tend to overinflate ourselves, and we have a fear of being vulnerable. And let's face it, I mean, again, it's not very pleasant to think about where we might be wrong and actively try to fix those things. So I want to point out some signs of low self-awareness. It includes defensiveness, especially when we're receiving negative feedback, repeating negative emotional patterns, regretting decisions that you make, and exhibiting behavior that doesn't match what you want to convey. What we really want to do when we're having strong emotional responses about something is to pause and reflect on the trigger. Many times there is a deep rooted issue that's actually the underlying cause. Um, so, for example, I used to work with a woman who would just fly off the handle and start yelling when she got stressed. And we all started to notice that she would get stressed about technical issues or computer problems. Um, but she was oblivious to this and she'd just fly off into a rage and would unfortunately end up alienating her coworkers. And when management tried to talk to her about this, she got very defensive, and she was genuinely surprised that other staff mentioned they don't want to work with her. So I say this to say that many of us remain blissfully unaware of our emotions. And if we don't control them, they control us. So here's some boosting strategies to enhance your own self-awareness. First, practice asking yourself why you feel or felt the way you do or did. This allows you reflection time for what you may have done wrong, what you can continue doing or stop doing. Second is check for reactions from your audience or from the people around you. Watch people's body language. Do they avoid eye contact, for example? Do they step away from you? Do they check their watch or their phone? Any of these are signs that you may need to change your focus. Essentially, you want to ask yourself, are you getting the reaction that you want from other people? So third, ask a friend or colleague whom you trust for feedback. Did what you say in that meeting come across in the way you intended? If you're not getting the results that you want from your job search, ask someone, for example, from this group, for their reactions. And don't just listen, but take action. Again, how you see yourself may not be the same as how other people see you. And especially in the job search, it's about perception. And you just don't want to come across negatively. Last, and I really like this one, is pause, reflect, and choose. Pausing your brain just for a couple of seconds is going to allow you to stop before potentially doing or saying something that you might later regret. Reflect on what you're doing, why you're doing it. Is this really the image you want to project? Are you getting what you want by behaving this way? And finally, choose. Remember that emotions are universal, but behavior is a choice, and you can always choose to behave in a particular way. I want to talk a little more about empathy now. So, empathy, as we've discussed, is about recognizing, understanding, and appreciating how other people feel. It involves articulating your understanding of the other person's perspective and behaving in a way that respects their feelings. So, to boost your empathy, first talk to people. Don't make assumptions. You never know what someone else's journey has been or what they're going through until they tell you. Second is listen to truly hear, not to respond. This is a big one because it's something most of us don't practice on a regular basis, and our communications would improve so much if we could mindfully start doing this. Next is remove your own filters. This is also pretty hard to do because we're human. And I think we've all had this experience a few times in our lives. We've gone to the same event, we've watched the same movie, we've spoken to the same person, and each of us has a very different take on what happened or what it meant to us. Two people can experience the same conversation in very different ways. And we don't know what the other person's perspective is unless they choose to share it with us. And lastly, I'd like to mention the platinum rule. This takes the golden rule a step further. And we all know what the golden rule is: do unto others as they would have done unto you. The problem with the golden rule is that it makes the assumption that your needs are the same as my needs. And that's not necessarily the case. With the platinum rule, you're treating others how they want to be treated. And again, this isn't easy to do. You have to have a conversation with somebody to understand what their needs are. All right, and I'm going to move on to flexibility. This involves adjusting our emotions and behavior to unfamiliar and unpredictable situations and conditions. When someone is low on flexibility, let me pause here just a moment. Starting to get cotton mouth here. So someone who's low with flexibility tends to be rigid in thinking. They may not be open to change. One more second, sorry.
No worries, Edythe. We've all been there before.
This is what happens when you talk too much, right? Thank you, Robert. So low flexibility, someone, when they're low with this, they're rigid, they are not open to change, they may be slow to act, or they may not act at all. And they also may have trouble admitting when they're wrong. So let me give you an example here. I think the pandemic and the years after the pandemic have been a real test of our flexibility. It's been stressful times for a lot of us. And when we are stressed, we naturally want to regain a sense of control so that we can get back in our comfort zones. And this means that as we are grasping for that control, we may become more and more rigid, ironically, and that just makes things worse. We live in an agile and ever-changing world, and there's a lot of things that we can't control. But as a reminder, we can control our behavior and we can control our responses. Actually, before I move on to reality testing, I need to tell you about some strategies that you can try to boost your flexibility. So first, be conscious of being open. Don't close yourself off. Next, try to change something in your daily routine. This could be as simple as driving a different way home from work, walking on a different path, even trying a different flavor of ice cream. So start small and then start thinking of new ways that you can tackle your problems. If you're not getting the results that you want, something needs to change. So you could try a different approach in conversations that aren't going the way that you want. And then just watching how people respond to you. And finally, for some people, it could help to encourage flexibility by seeing it as a challenge. And when we challenge ourselves to do something differently, we can find the opportunity in doing so. And then the more you practice being flexible, the more flexible you'll be. And then I want to take a look at this element called reality testing. This is our ability and tendency to remain objective by seeing things as they really are. and recognizing when emotions or personal bias can cause us to be less objective. This is our ability to look at external data objectively, paying attention to what is, not what we wish something to be or fear something to be. It's what the data really is. It's not our perception of the data. So there are a couple of things that we can do to boost reality testing, and that is to first check your bias. Learn to identify what your biases are so that you can potentially avoid them. So some of the things we can start doing to check our bias is differentiating between what's really going on versus our interpretation of what's going on. So finding evidence for your beliefs instead of searching for finding evidence for the other side rather than searching for evidence that supports your beliefs. Try to find evidence on the other side of the spectrum. This is what I'm trying to say here. Develop best and worst case scenarios. It's also important to check in with others and do reality checks. For example, did I hear that right? What I got from this meeting is blah, blah, blah. How about you? Or I thought John made an excellent point to Mr. Smith today. Do you think he saw it that way? So those are some boosting strategies for this element called reality testing. Okay, so if you've stuck around for this long, I am going to make an educated guess that you really want to get better at emotional intelligence. And if that's the case, I have a homework assignment for you. And this assignment is one thing that you can do to improve yourself in this area as it touches on every element of emotional intelligence. And that's to listen to someone with whom you disagree. Don't try to convince them. Shift your mindset from here's why I'm right to here's how I might be wrong. And you can do this with any hot button item. And I know this is not easy. Believe me, I know this isn't easy, especially if we're talking about something like politics, and you're speaking with someone who's on the other side. But I will state here that this is something that very few of us do on a regular basis. And if we were to practice this more, I can guarantee you that we will see change, and it will be good change. So this is my challenge to you. So I think I would like to pause here and check in with the group and answer any questions that you have.
So folks, let's give Edythe a big virtual round of applause, and we will take about 10 minutes of questions. Before we get to the questions, I should note that earlier in the conversation, Edythe had mentioned the importance of having a really good LinkedIn profile. And for folks who are 50 and over, we're partnering with several libraries this Friday, including the Milton Library, where folks will be able to get a free professional LinkedIn headshot. I believe that's from 10 to 2 at the Milton Library, and information about that will be in the follow-up email I send tomorrow. Also of note in the chat, Linda has started an accountability, is looking for an accountability buddy. And if anyone wants to be Linda's accountability buddy, shoot her an email in the chat. All right, here we go. And Linda, a couple of these questions don't even have to do with EQ, but we'll take your opinion and advice anyway. Melissa would like to know, should a college degree be removed from a resume?
So
and I think she might be in part talking about either the graduation year or perhaps if the job doesn't require a degree and you don't want to appear overqualified. So I'm not sure which direction she's going in, but that's the question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Robert. I know a lot of people do have this question. If they've graduated a long time ago, should they include the dates? And My answer to that is, as far as resume goes, it's your choice what you put on a resume. A resume is not a legal document like a job application where they will ask for this specific information. So I would say you do your use your best judgment for this.
Yogesh, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing, would love to network and connect with people. He is in the healthcare biopharma investment industry, also interested in financing and banking. His email address is in the chat. And then we have Jessica and Jay and Angela and Genevieve and Audrey and Ellen all thanking you for a wonderful presentation. All right, so now I'm going to jump over to the Q&A box. Tammy asks, are there best practices for showcasing, boy, I can't speak today. Maybe I need a glass of water. Tammy is asking, are there best practices for showcasing emotional intelligence in your LinkedIn profile? So how do you come across as a high EQ in your LinkedIn profile?
My short answer to that is to be mindful of the audience you are attempting to connect with on LinkedIn, and try to write a profile and engage with content that would be appealing to them and capture their attention. It's a really, really interesting question. There's not a really easy answer to it.
An anonymous attendee asks, when receiving negative feedback, what's the difference between becoming defensive versus explaining the context or the reason for the error? So what is the difference between being defensive versus explaining the reason for the error when receiving negative feedback? Where's that line?
That is also a super interesting question that there's not an easy answer to. I would say that defensiveness, when you're defensive, it's almost that you're responding without thinking in an effort to protect yourself or to explain yourself. And if you can get yourself out of that mindset, and it's often going to be, you might have to just pause a little bit, right? Because if you feel yourself getting angry, or you feel your blood pressure rising when you're getting critical feedback, it's a good idea to pause and either walk away or pause and come back to that conversation at a later time when you can be more clear-headed. It's a lot of us, when we're in that situation, it's not possible to think with our rational brain, our prefrontal cortex, because we're in that fight or flight mode. So this is why pausing and just regrouping yourself is so important.
And Christina in the chat says to watch your tone. That's could be the difference between explaining the context of the mistake versus being coming across as defensive. So I think your tone is important. She says, Tammy in the Q&A asks, you mentioned that EQ can be measured like IQ. Is there an optimum score we should be shooting for?
No, there's no optimum score in this assessment. And the reason for that is that unlike IQ, an EQ assessment requires context and a lot of interpretation. Our EQ scores are going to change over time. They're not like IQ. IQ is relatively stagnant. When we are 19 to 20, we reach around the same IQ. Our IQ isn't going to change much after that, but our EQ should change with development and skill building. And it really does give you an advantage because, unlike IQ, it does change and you can control it. So the other thing about EQ, we have one IQ of 100 is the average in a particular norm group, and it's the same with EQ. And so anything that's in this range of 100 to 110 is going to be considered good, above average. But in certain situations, especially if you're in a leadership role, it should be aimed a little bit higher. If you get to close to 130 on any element in emotional intelligence, this is in danger of being overused. So some of these things can work against you. And it's really quite complicated to think about how these elements interact with each other. And this is why the assessment it really does require you to sit down and talk to a skilled practitioner for this. And so there is no really optimum score per se for you to have. And actually, Robert, if I can move on to
Sure.
The offer screen here, because if anybody is interested in this, so I do emotional intelligence coaching and assessment. And if you are here in this participating in this webinar, I'm giving you a discounted rate on that if this is of interest to you. And I don't know if there's any career practitioners who are with us today, but there is a class that I teach through Peak Careers that's going to begin in February. And I'm sorry, there's a typo there. It's February 2025. And then my podcast EQ at Work. And please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. I would love to connect with you all. And this is my email address. I just wanted to get that in there, Robert, before where we reach the 3 o'clock. So, but
yeah, we are doing a hard stop at 3 o'clock. Let's take 2 more questions and then we will wrap it up. But yes, folks, obviously it's up to you, but certainly if you're interested, take advantage of Edythe's offers. So Miriam says, can you please share where we can take EQ assessments?
Absolutely. You can feel free to reach out to me to take the assessment. Reach out to me through email or on LinkedIn.
And I will ask this question. It could go in a lot of different directions, and we only have 2 minutes. But an anonymous attendee asks, how can we incorporate emotional intelligence into our job interviews? What could be the potential reasons for not getting a job after reaching the final round of interviews? This has happened to me in the last 4 to 5 job interviews. So is there anything that this person could be doing to incorporate EQ better in their job interviews? They're not quite landing the job. They're getting so close.
Yeah, and that and I'm sorry to hear that. This could be a number of reasons outside of the person's control too. So I would encourage you to think about that. There may be some things that you can do, but there may be some things beyond your control. If you do have an interview coach or someone who can work with you, who can really give you some honest feedback about how you're coming across, and then if you can incorporate that feedback into your communication style, that's a great place to start.
And so, folks, here is what's coming up. This Wednesday from 9:30 to 11:30, our 50-plus job seekers networking group meets. The guest speaker is going to be Chris Haxton. He'll be talking about resumes. He is from Career Jolt Pro. He is a resume writer, resume coach. He'll be talking about resumes. He is the main speaker for Wednesday. On Friday, from 10 to 2 at the Milton Library, any job seeker who is 50 and over can get a free headshot that they can use for their LinkedIn profile. And you sign up for a 5-minute appointment. I will include that information in the chat. We have in the past held that here in Tewksbury, but we wanted a more central location. So we're going to Milton on Friday from 10 to 2. And then this group will meet once again next Monday at 2 o'clock. And the name of that talk is How to Uncover the Hidden Job Market and that will be with Leanne Rod, who's the Chief Talent Officer or the lead recruiter for an organization called Flex Professionals. So that's what we have coming up over the next 7 days. Leanne, no, you're not Leanne, you're Edythe. Edythe, any last words for the audience before we wrap it up?
I thank you so much, Robert, for inviting me here, and thank you all for tuning in. I'm wishing you all the best with your job search. So I'm hoping you can get the results that you want. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you all.
Yes, connect with everyone. Connect with Edythe on LinkedIn, folks. I'll include her LinkedIn profile in the follow-up email tomorrow, along with this recording, along with the slides, along with the chat, and information about the other things I just mentioned that I won't go over again. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thanks again, Edythe.
Thank you. Take care, folks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.